Okay, everybody can sit down, everybody can relax, you can stop your worrying because I found the song of the summer. I did, it's called Girls Just Wanna Have Sex by Maisie. This entire album, Blotter Baby, I'm gonna have on repeat throughout the summer season. It's fun, it's gay, it's psychedelic. You are welcome. Okay, now to move on to the horror movies of the summer. Just kidding, probably not, but we are gonna talk about some recent horror releases. In a Violent Nature, which came out a couple of weeks ago, I just caught up on that one, it's still in theaters. And then The Watchers, which is the directorial debut of M. Night Shyamalan's daughter. Whoa, that one just released on Friday. We're gonna be doing a spoiler-free chat of both movies, and if I feel like it, maybe I'll add a little spoiler section at the very end. But In a Violent Nature should be releasing to Shudder probably within the next few months, and The Watchers just released, so I don't really think that now is a good time for spoilers anyway. Before I dive into it, how rude of me. I was so preoccupied with sharing my favorite new gay song that I forgot to tell you that I'm the Antichrist. Hi, I'm Satan's favorite daughter. This YouTube channel is where I run my online virtual cult. By clicking subscribe, you do devote your soul to me, but I keep it safe. Like, you don't even need to worry about it anymore. Super fun. And also by clicking like and the notification bell, you never miss the next video. To kick off today's cult meeting, let's talk about In a Violent Nature first. In a Violent Nature was sold to us as a slasher where we follow the point of view of the killer instead of the victims. I don't know if any deeper synopsis of this movie exists. I don't know if the trailer was any deeper than that, but the movie wasn't really any deeper than that, so I can't imagine so. If you're new here, I don't watch trailers of movies that I'm interested in. To give you an example of trailers that I have watched recently, most recently would be for The Strangers Chapter 1, because my wicked spidey senses told me that it was gonna be terrible, and it was. Who knew it? This girl. I also watched the trailer for the remake of Speak No Evil. That just looks like a carbon copy of the original. Once again, my satanic spidey senses were correct. Before that, I watched the trailer for The Exorcist Believer, so really, I'm never wrong. I didn't watch the trailer for either In a Violent Nature or The Watchers. In a Violent Nature, particularly because the concept of it just fascinated me, that was enough to get me interested, but ultimately, the hype surrounding that aspect of the movie, it didn't live up to that for me. It was not even really interesting to me from when the movie began. I enjoyed how when we were in the killer's perspective, the movie took on a more comedic tone. It wasn't campy, it just felt like a very dark satire, and it also was just giving Friday the 13th, because I swear that we didn't really get that much more of the killer's POV than we do from Jason, but in the beginning it was kind of promising. I was thinking, okay, this definitely does have a pretty voyeuristic quality to it. It's different, but right from the very beginning, it was a little bit too slow for me. If we were following a more interesting killer, like a Michael Myers carbon copy rather than a Jason Voorhees carbon copy, then I think it could have been a lot more interesting. We do kind of see him playing around with the victims and stuff, but I'm more talking about I'd want to see, you know, the process of Michael setting up the bodies like statues, you know, like Halloween Kills when he puts the masks on all the people. I mean, for me personally, the whole mystique of people only coming upon that after the fact is a lot more spooky. I feel like it would detract from things if you saw the method behind what Michael does. And I do think In a Violent Nature kind of leans into that. I don't think the movie is really trying to be scary, but on the other hand, it doesn't really lean far enough into the gimmick. In fact, by the end of the movie, it's more or less completely abandoned. I thought that I was walking into a movie where the killer was the main character, but it felt completely like an ensemble cast. I couldn't point to any one person and say that was the lead. So that was weird because it just doesn't really give you anything to latch onto. The only thing that it does, like the only motivations that you do understand are of the killer. I mean, the young adults that are there to be the slasher fodder, they don't need any motivations. They just went out to a cabin in the woods to party and stuff, and they don't want to die. That's fine. But then the motivation that they give the killer is he's like this supernatural entity who's got mommy issues. And even when like his makeup and stuff is revealed, like he looks like Jason. And I'm sorry, I know that this is like getting into more spoilery territory, but in my reviews, I do like to set up people with like the right expectations of what they're walking into. So then by the end, the whole feeling of voyeurism has been so broken up, it's like you completely lose that feeling. Maybe it wasn't intentionally sold that way, maybe that was something that people that first viewed the movie, because I think it debuted at Sundance, maybe it was something that the audience members latched onto and that wasn't actually like the original intent. I didn't do any research today. Sometimes when I do reviews, I do include clips of like director interviews, cast interviews, stuff like that. I didn't look into that, so I don't know for certain, but I think that that was the intention overall. I really, really wish that it had stuck to that because it's such an interesting idea, and had there been actual follow through with it, I think we could have gotten somewhere. And I forgot to mention, actually going back to my mention of Michael Myers, when the killer would be standing in the shadows behind the protagonists, if you will, he almost looked just like Michael. It was so weird. Like when his face was heavily shadowed, it looked a lot like Michael Myers' mask. So it was a weird blend of Jason and Michael. I think that very obviously like these people wanted to make something with the Friday the 13th IP, and they were like, whatever, like we'll just do our own version of it. But you could tell that there were also a lot of influences from Michael. His voyeuristic nature, standing in the shadows, playing with the bodies of his victims, you get it. As far as his look though, once he gets his mask, which I think is on the poster of the film, so again, not a spoiler, I could not help but think of the SpongeBob SquarePants movie. I can't remember the name of that character because I don't think it has any dialogue, but the scuba diver in the SpongeBob SquarePants movie, do you guys know what I'm talking about? For some reason, the mask was giving that energy to me. I think it's also because of how consistently he's just tromping through the woods. Like the sound design for majority of the movie is literally just him taking these clompy footsteps. And that is a major part of the character in the SpongeBob SquarePants movie because of his big ass feet. But anyway, speaking of the tromping, oh my god. I don't know if you guys know anybody in your life that is a heavy walker. No, not even just a heavy walker, like of a clompy walker. All of us have a family that drives us crazy, right? So one of my sisters, she is the clompiest walker that ever clomped. When you walk around with her, all you hear is just like the slapping of her Converse hitting the pavement, okay? That is what the sound design in this movie reminded me of, because for so much of it, it's just silent and you're just staring at the back of this killer's head as he's clomping through the forest. And after a while, that got on my nerves. I have a few things that do get under my skin. People smacking when they eat, mouth breathers, and yes, clompy walkers. So that was getting under my skin, not for the right reasons during this movie. Of course, during the kill scenes and stuff, I really did appreciate the sound design. It's not to say that it wasn't well done, because it absolutely was. And some of you guys, I think, will love that. It'll be like, oh my gosh, ASMR, take a stroll through the forest. Speaking of the kills too, the very first kill in the movie is an obvious homage to Friday the 13th Part 5. You will know it exactly when you see it. That's not a problem because there are a lot of other unique kills. Not super unique, except for that one kill. If you see any kind of cryptic reviews talking about how there's like the kill of the century in the movie, that one is fantastic, and my audience was audibly reacting to it. A lot of people in the audience were going, oh, oh, oh. And they were also laughing. I was surprised because just in my area, I feel like a lot of people don't really get the darker parts of horror comedies, but luckily my audience was laughing a bit when they were supposed to laugh. I was too. Some parts of the movie are just so fucked up that you have to laugh, and then other parts are kind of just genuinely funny. Not including some of the character dialogue though. That was another thing that was a little bit annoying to me. Once again, copying Friday the 13th, there is this really juicy campfire story. I thought that that was well done. But then as soon as you start to learn just these tiny little bits about these characters, because you learn pretty much nothing about them the whole runtime, as soon as you do, you start to realize how annoying they are. It also was clearly written by someone that is about 10 years behind in terms of like internet culture, because the characters were using terms like canceled and toxic masculinity, both terms that carried weight at some point but have completely lost meaning because of how they're used now. I always have to side-eye dialogue or even a living, breathing person when they use the term canceled, because that is completely dismissive of what actually happens when someone is like facing repercussions on the internet. It's it's called consequences of your actions, right? So I just was like, okay, this writer I'm maybe not gonna be a fan of. Maybe it was intentional because there was no part of this movie that I think was trying to get you actually invested in any of these characters. So maybe I do have to actually give it to them that they wanted us to be like, okay, yeah, it's time for these people to die, hell yeah. But it doesn't make it not annoying to watch is the thing, especially because it's not campy. And I don't want us to lose sight of the term campy because it is a dark comedy. There are parts of it that are funny. It is not over the top. To me, it very much reads as just a satire. Had it been more campy with these characters being so annoying, I'd be like, okay, yes. But it's not. Some parts still border on a little bit too serious for me not to just feel annoyed. Actually, there was one part that I thought was pretty campy, and it seems like a very obvious reference to I Know What You Did Last Summer. I don't want to spoil it because I was laughing, but nobody else in my theater got it though. So I really hope that was intentional, because if it was, bravo, well done. Oh my gosh, and I forgot to mention about my theater. I was in the Nicole Kidman theater. I drove a half hour out to the AMC in Porter Ranch because there were no earlier showings at my theater, and I'm very jet lagged right now, so no, I cannot make an 8:40 p.m. showtime. I've been going to bed at 8:30, so. But yeah, oh my god, it was sound that I could feel. Heartbreak never felt so good in a place like that. Anyway, I should wrap it up for In a Violent Nature so we can move on to the watchers, but let's just finish out with some positives. Yay! If you follow me on Letterboxd, which I've recently changed the handle of my Letterboxd, so the link probably isn't working on older videos, I have changed the upload defaults now. Now I am Haunted Hippie. I'm at Haunted Hippie on Letterboxd. But anyway, I rated it 3 stars on Letterboxd, which is not bad. I didn't give it a heart, and there is a world of difference between a 3-star movie that you give a heart and one that you don't give a heart, but 3 stars is, I might watch it again someday. Didn't regret watching, it interested me. So even though I have a lot of complaints, this was not a flop for me by any means. I thought that the camera work was gorgeous. It's in a 4:3 ratio, and I'm not really sure why. I thought maybe it was to keep us in more of a limited POV of the killer, keep the world a little bit tighter. He's a one-track mind, he's a simple mind. I thought maybe they were gonna play with that, but they didn't really. The only reason why I could tell why they did it in 4:3 was just because it looked good. It had really gorgeous cinematography. Some shots I was very impressed by. I really liked the look of it. It just didn't seem that purposeful to me. I should watch some director interviews because I'm sure that it was. I couldn't tell. Because you watch something like The Lighthouse that's in 4:3 and that really lends itself to the claustrophobia of the whole thing. In a Violent Nature, it didn't really do anything for me in that regard, other than maybe it gave it a little bit more of a nostalgic feeling. Like, yeah, this one would be great to watch on one of those little 90s VHS combo players for sure. Just couldn't fully tell what the intention was with that, but it was still gorgeous. I also loved the lack of the score in this movie. I can't conjure another movie up in my mind that doesn't have a score because that's extremely uncommon. All I can say is that I think it really worked for this film, and I recommend this movie. I don't think that it's a waste of time, particularly for the kills. You might walk out of the movie feeling differently because there is a lot of downtime. It is a very slow burn. I'm glad that I watched it in a theater. Somebody on Letterboxd said that you should see it in a theater because if you watch it at home, your phone is going to be calling to you. I 100% second that. If I waited till this was on Shudder and I watched it at home, I know that I probably would be on my phone the whole time, and I probably would have given it a lower rating, honestly. If you're a gore hound, give it a go. If you're interested in a little bit more avant-garde cinema, you just want something a little bit different, then check it out. All right, now let's move on to The Watchers. The Watchers is one that I don't want to give a synopsis for because I went into the movie completely blind. I didn't know the synopsis. I didn't see a single trailer. I didn't see any promotional materials for the movie at all. Had no idea what it was going to be about. I think that I vaguely might have caught a glimpse of a trailer and saw like a forest setting. Had no idea what it was about, and I'm so glad that that's how I walked into the movie. I do know that it is an adaptation from a book, so for a lot of people it's not going to be possible to go in blind, but if you're somebody that likes to go in blind, you're not a trailer girly, then I would maybe click off of this video and go see the movie. I have a very unpopular opinion. I seem to have loved the movie a lot more than most people did, but if you were unaware of the movie, then maybe this is a good time to click off and just go try it out, and I'll be waiting here for you when you get back, because you never know. Like, you never never know. Sometimes trailers set up the wrong expectations. Sometimes that is quite literally the reason why people don't like the final product that actually comes out, because they've just built up the wrong thing in their head. So I'm just giving you that chance to click off now before I get into the trailer, the synopsis, and my spoiler-free thoughts. My spoiler-free thoughts, yes, I'm not gonna get into anything about the plot or the characters or whatever, but it is impossible to talk about the movie without getting into some of the elements about it. So here's your out. All right, getting into the trailer now. A 28-year-old artist gets stranded in an expansive, untouched forest in Western Ireland. Finding shelter, she unknowingly becomes trapped alongside 3 strangers who are stalked by mysterious creatures every night. This is also the directorial debut of Ishana Night Shyamalan, which I think is so exciting. This movie does have its problems. I feel like people are being really tough on it online, and for a lot of people that's definitely valid. However you feel about the movie is valid, but I do think that because this is such a unique film, particularly in the subgenre of horror that it is, I think that for a lot of people it's just not gonna be for them, and I feel like that's not a reflection really of the actual quality of the movie. I gave the movie 4 stars, which is a little bit higher than I think the actual quality of the film, which might be more like 3 stars. But in terms of my enjoyment, I was actually kind of towing the line between 4 and 4.5 stars. I had a really good time in the theater because it is horror fantasy. That is something so different. We don't really get that. I am actually an advocate for calling Lord of the Rings and Harry Potter a gateway horror, but it's been 20 years since fantasy was in the mainstream like that. I know that we have Game of Thrones and we have Rings of Power, we have House of the Dragon. Those are extremely popular, but I am talking about the theater, the cinema. Fantasy died out from the cinema about 20 years ago. Unless, what is Mad Max? Is that fantasy? I know that Dune is fantasy, but Dune is like depressing fantasy. You know what I mean? This is like hardcore fantasy, and it's also horror. That is my shit, okay? I was able to forgive a lot of things about the movie that were definitely quite tired. First things first, Dakota Fanning, she carried. I think this is a really exciting project for her to come back to acting. She took a brief little break, I think after Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. The cinematography and just the whole ambiance of the film is gorgeous. It also has some folk horror elements to it, and that is probably my favorite subgenre of horror. I need to do a top 10 list of my favorite subgenres, but anyway, I think all the acting of the movie was great. Georgina Campbell, ooh, we love her. We love her from Barbarian. I'm so happy that she is still getting these big theatrical roles. I would like her to be in more. She is a great leading lady. I think that more people should recognize that. So much about the movie was just so unique. I think the only other thing that I've seen this year in the horror genre that has struck me as so unique is Lisa Frankenstein. And even that still hinges on the many texts that came before of Frankenstein. The First Omen and Immaculate were great, but of course are very, Rosemary's Baby coded. This, yes, based on a book, but in terms of cinema, when was the last time y'all saw something like this? I know most of you probably haven't seen the movie yet, but I'm just saying. That's why I'm writing so hard for it. Personally, it also just happened to be such a niche thing that I loved. But I do have to step back and I do have to recognize there are some big problems with the movie. Some things that a lot of people could not get past on Rotten Tomatoes and Letterboxd. We'll get into that in a second. For example, there are rules that are set up and there is a lot of exposition dump that's set up that we literally never return to. Things that they seem to make a point to show us in the first act that literally just never come back. I can assume one of 2 things with that. Either number 1, they were elements that were somehow really important to the book. Maybe they helped to build out a character in the book, but it was something that they just didn't have time for in the movie. And on the note of time, I think number 2, maybe they did circle back to that in the 3rd act or something, but then through rounds of edits, they decided to shorten the movie or whatever, and some of that stuff was lost, but then they didn't go back and remove that stuff from the beginning. I think this movie definitely would have benefited from just one last round of edits to trim some of that unnecessary exposition. The other glaring issue for me personally was that this movie does have the dead mom trope. That's something that you learn about the main character very early on, and that is indeed the kind of the vessel through which we explore this character's arc. And I think that is so so tired. Again, it's probably from the book, but that is something that I wish they took the liberty to change. Although I will say, for me, the rest of the plot and the setting of the film was why I was able to excuse those glaring issues. Because again, the plot was a vessel that was just so unique that I was like, okay, whatever. It's just this gorgeous fucked up fairy tale and I loved it. I just want to unpack a few things that I've seen on Letterboxd. If you're the type of person that watches or reads a ton of reviews before deciding to go to a movie, I just want to chat about that a little bit and offer my perspective because yes, I am kind of trying to convince you to go see this film. Obviously, I'm gonna stress yet again that this is definitely not gonna be for everyone. One of the top reviews says that in general the movie has trouble creating a sense of peril, which I found a really, really interesting note because this is the first movie in a long time that has actually made me feel scared. Not for majority of the runtime, I was just fine, but in the third act, the movie does take a big swing. There's a big turn at the end, and I felt really uneasy. I actually was kind of grasping for my phone, and I had to like stop myself from looking at it and look at the screen because I realized that I kind of like I wanted to look away. I was stressed out. So I found that really interesting, and in the same review, they also go on to talk about like how we don't get to know the characters and how there's a lot of idle time and how they wish that the characters maybe, you know, we got to know them better during those idle moments and that the movie was a bore, which I found to be the complete opposite. I actually really, really loved the pacing of the movie. Now, having watched it all the way through to the end, I would, you know, I'd go back and I'd have them trim out those weird moments of exposition that never come back around. But something about this movie, it's, okay, the best thing that I can compare it to probably, and this is gonna sound bad, is Don't Worry, Darling. I feel like people were unnecessarily hard on that movie when, yes, there were so many logical issues with that movie. If you sat there and you picked it apart, it made no sense. But being in the theater, I was highly entertained. Like, I really liked that movie. And it's the same thing with The Watchers. There is so much that you can pick apart, but I was thoroughly entertained. I did not notice the runtime, and I think it's only an hour and 40 minutes. I had a blast. I thought the pacing was great. I was super, super interested and invested throughout the runtime. And again, maybe that's because I went into it knowing nothing about it. Maybe if I had read the book, of course, that leaves a lot more room for disappointment. So maybe that's where this person is coming from. I don't know. I'm just really surprised that it has a 29% on Rotten Tomatoes. That does feel really harsh to me. Also, one of the most popular reviews is Shauna Night Shyamalan really is stepping into her father's footsteps by making bad movies. Dude, I don't know. Like, I feel lost in this. Yeah, there is a ton to pick apart, but I was entertained at the end of the day. I had a good time. Like, I don't know. Movies they just don't need to be logical to me. Unless the movie is trying really, really hard to be logical. Otherwise, I don't know. I don't care. I feel like I'm really missing something. I think especially for a directorial debut, she took so many swings. The movie is heavily stylized. I also love the look of the effects, and I won't get into that because I really don't want to spoil things, but I can't help but wonder if some of these negative reviews just come from the implicit bias of people not liking M. Night Shyamalan. But I personally still try to go into every new Shyamalan movie hoping to like it. I don't set myself up with wild expectations or anything, but I still want to like every movie that I try to see. Again, however you feel about it is totally valid. I just think that some people kind of enjoy hopping on the bandwagon when they can't think of any of their own original thoughts, and it's popular to hate on M. Night Shyamalan. So if all you've been seeing is the negativity about the movie, I just really wanted to offer you a different perspective. Yes, I don't have as much to say about The Watchers as I did with In a Violent Nature because in order to do so, I really would have to get into a bit of spoilers. So sorry for having a shorter spoiler-free section for it here. And you know what? I don't think I want to get into spoilers today. If I get enough feedback on this video by the time the end of June rolls around, then maybe I'll do a spoiler section at the end of my June recap video. I'm totally open to that, so I'm gonna wait on your feedback and then we'll see. Maybe I'll do spoilers at the end of the month. But I do recommend both of these movies. I'm an advocate for the theater, so I do recommend seeing both of them in theaters. Once again, In a Violent Nature, not really for me. Like, maybe I would rewatch it someday if it ever comes out on physical media, which Shudder is really good about, releasing their stuff on physical media. The Watchers, I would love to own that movie. I think that you could have a really, really beautiful physical media release for it, but it'll probably end up on like Hulu or something. So anyway, yeah, that's gonna do it. If you want even more content from me though, I do have a second channel, and that's where I post a lot of travel content, but it's mostly dedicated to talking about physical media. If you couldn't tell from the last few minutes, I'm very, very passionate about physical media. So you can check that out, and if you would like even more bonus content from me, I post weekly, a weekly bonus video to my Patreon. Everything that you need is linked down below, including all the rest of my social media, but more than anything, I hope that you enjoyed this video, and I hope I catch you in the next one. Bye!